And welcome to the special audience edition of Hannity. And tonight I'm joined by renowned Middle East experts, elected officials, political analysts, and much more. Now, in a moment, you're going to hear directly from our audience. But first, on a week when President Obama made his very first trip to Israel since taking office more than 4 years ago, we continue to see more of the same from our campaigner-in-chief. Now, he met with Israel's leaders. He spoke to the youth. But as usual, he offered no real solutions for Middle East peace. And despite attempting to bridge the gap that he created with one of our biggest allies, well, it's going to take a lot more than a few days in Israel to fix the reckless foreign policy of the past 4 years. Now, luckily, President Obama is aware of the challenge.
Now, meeting none of these challenges will be easy. This is not easy. Ultimately, this is a really hard problem. It is a hard slog to work through all of these issues. Some of it's just because it's hard, precisely because it's hard.
Yes, Mr. President, aside from hitting the links with Tiger Woods and palling around with Jay-Z, Beyonce, you know what? Being the leader of the free world, that's hard work. Now, although Obama received a warm welcome from most Israelis, his trip, well, did not go entirely as planned. Now, it started with protests in the West Bank, and that included burning of the American flag and the burning of images of Obama himself. And then there was some, well, car trouble when the armored Cadillac limo that was supposed to transport the president all throughout the Holy Land, well, that broke down. They put in the wrong fuel, and it had to be towed. And what would a presidential speech be without a, well, few hecklers? Listen to what Jerusalem.
I believe your future is bound to ours. No.
And with reminders throughout the week of his failures to address tensions in the Middle East for the past 4 years, what happens from here? Is Obama going to continue his foreign policy approach that simply has not worked, or is he going to chart a new course? To help answer that question, we bring in now our distinguished studio audience. Good to see you all. Thanks for being here. You can give yourselves a hand, you know. All right. Am I wrong? Show of hands. My belief, a strongly held belief, one of the biggest challenges the world now faces is the rise of radical Islamists. How many of you agree with that? Anybody disagree? Nobody here disagrees? Do you think, for better or worse, has Obama made the situation in the Middle East better? Raise your hand. Worse. Okay. Why?
The approval of the United States is lower in the Arab world than it was under George W. Bush. He has presented an unclear message as to where the United States should be going and where the Arab world should be going. And he's refused to call the jihadis what they are, an enemy of civilization, both of the Arabs and of us, and to call for the continuation of the war on terror. He refuses to use the word enemy, use the word jihad, and to engage in an ideological war, which this war, like the Cold War, is.
All right, but before we get to everybody else's comments, remember Georgetown University? There was a crucifix, and early in the Obama presidency, remember they covered that? Okay, let's take a look at Obama. This is him speaking, and over his head is a picture of a known terrorist. His name is Yasser Arafat. Now, if they're going to cover the cross, I wouldn't speak with a picture of Arafat over my head as a U.S. president. Would you, Monica Crowley?
I absolutely would not, but have you noticed no criticism of this? No criticism.
Except for me. Hello.
Except for Sean Hannity and the rest of us here on this panel. No criticism. The media is completely in his pocket. We've talked about this many times. When you talk about if he's made the situation in the Middle East worse, if he's exacerbated tensions, if he has encouraged the rise of the Islamists, I would argue absolutely. Look at the policy toward Egypt. A longstanding U.S. ally, he throws overboard. What do we get in his place? The Muslim Brotherhood, a sworn enemy of the United States and the West. Look at Libya. Yes, Muammar Gaddafi was a terrorist who had killed Americans, but by the time Barack Obama became president, Muammar Gaddafi was cooperating with our intelligence services, providing huge amounts of intel about al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood operations in North Africa. He is now gone. What do you have in his place? Chaos, but also Islamist, Muslim Brotherhood, and al-Qaeda.
Well said.
And it is happening across the Middle East with his assent, with his encouragement. So you can only come away with looking at Obama's Middle East policy as something that is against U.S. interests and in the interests of the Islamists that are taking power.
This is a great point, because he did go on his apology tour, and I'm going to play that cut in just a second here. But it's interesting, Congressman Louie Gohmert, because we're giving Mohammed Morsi, who referred to our allies as the Israelis as the descendants of apes and pigs. We're giving them F-16s. We're giving them tanks. We're giving them $1.5 billion. And then he's, I'm trying to understand the logic behind this.
Well, and that's why he's doing so well amongst radicals, and why he's not doing well with most of the Muslim world. I mean, I've met with Muslims in the Northern Alliance in Afghanistan. They know they've been thrown under the bus, the people that defeated the Taliban initially. You go around the world, different places who have Muslims that have sided with us, they've been thrown under the bus. So he's out there plugging the radicals. And you bring up Arafat. You remember George W. Bush would meet with Arafat in the White House because he knew how that devastated our friends and encouraged our enemies. And you remember even in the gulags in the Soviet Union, when Reagan said evil empire about the Soviet Union, they applauded. It gave them strength. It helped them push forward. And Sharansky talks about that. And this president doesn't get it.
Nathan Sharansky talked about that.
Yes, that he was in the gulag. And when they found out a president used those two words,
it helped.
It made incredible encouragement.
And then, of course, there was the infamous speech by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, remember?
Oh, yeah.
And then comes to America and says, hey, you guys are blowing it too here.
That's right.
Two things. This week, Ambassador Bolton, good to see you too, and we're going to get everybody in, I promise. King Abdullah of Jordan said, we're making a big mistake by supporting the Muslim Brotherhood. Before I ask you a question, I want to take you back to Barack Obama's apology tour and ask you if this was effective and if you can tie the events together. Let's roll that tape.
America, like every other nation, has made mistakes and has its flaws. In America, there's a failure to appreciate Europe's leading role in the world. Instead of celebrating your dynamic union and seeking to partner with you to meet common challenges, there have been times where America has shown arrogance and been dismissive, even derisive.
9/11 was an enormous trauma to our country. The fear and anger that it provoked was understandable. But in some cases, it led us to act contrary to our traditions and our ideals. We are taking concrete actions to change course. I have unequivocally prohibited the use of torture by the United States, and I have ordered the prison at Guantanamo Bay closed by early next year. While the United States has done much to promote peace and prosperity in the hemisphere, we have at times been disengaged, and at times we've sought to dictate our terms.
Ambassador, arrogant, derisive, divisive, contrary to our ideals. America's guilty of torture, and yet we're giving money to the Muslim Brotherhood. Tell me what's wrong with that when you juxtapose those two. What's wrong with that?
Look, those kinds of comments don't win us any friends. They're seen as signs of weakness, and they are. They're seen as signs this president thinks history began with his administration. And when we tolerate and indeed encourage Muslim Brotherhood-type movements around the region and disregard friends like King Abdullah, like our other friends in the Arab world, we are giving encouragement to those who are going to try and overthrow them. And that's why if we think things are bad in the Middle East today, get ready. They're getting worse.
Yeah, King Abdullah said that the Muslim Brotherhood were wolves in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
What are they going to do with the F-16s that we give them, or the tanks we give them, or the money we give them? What do you think they'll do with those?
Well, I think we should suspend all assistance to Egypt until Morsi apologizes for some of the things he said. I think it's worth pursuing the military in Egypt. That's the only stable pro-American
wait a minute.
element
Hasn't the military
that's left.
Now, the leaders have been replaced by puppets of Morsi.
Before he completely replaces them and undoes all the aid that we've given him over the years. It's a very important country because if Morsi reneges on the Camp David Accord, the foundation of our policy in that region for 30 years, we in Israel are in real trouble.
All right, we got to take a break. I know we're going to get everybody in, I promise. A lot more to come. Still more with our studio audience of Middle East experts. And then later in the show, that's